Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at talking heads over the past week. The TT World Series and the cost of the feasibility study looking into the idea was the big talking point of the week. But we also touched on the new health and social care strategy and the World Health Organisation's conclusions about processed meat. But we'll start with the ongoing spat over politicians paying for parking, which spilled over from last week. Here's Stu Peters.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Is the debate over parking charges for politicians and some government workers an important issue? Chief Minister Alan Bell says he believes the outcome of the parking debate in last week's Tynwald was very unfortunate. The motion, which would have led to members of Tynwald paying for their parking spaces, was defeated after 6 members of the Legislative Council voted against the move, even though 17 members of the Keys had voted for it. The MHKs and MLCs who voted against it claimed that they were more than happy to pay on a personal level for their own car parking, but that the document was flawed and unfair, which was why they were standing against it. Meanwhile, Michael MHK Alf Cannon says the DOI document, which put forward proposals that would mean Tynwald members would have to pay for their parking, was flawed. Mr Cannon was one of the 6 MHKs to vote against the policy for allocation and charging for government car parking spaces in central Douglas, put forward by DOI Minister Phil Gaughan. Mr Cannon has since written a letter to Isle of Man newspapers strongly criticising what he views as misleading headlines. Is the debate over parking being turned into a bit of a witch hunt? Do you agree with the newspaper headlines, or do you think that it was irresponsible? Should politicians' time be spent debating more important issues, or does it come down to a matter of principle? Were the 12 politicians who voted against the policy doing so for the right reasons? Are you convinced of that? Or should the policy have been adopted regardless of any perceived flaws? If all these MHKs, MLCs are prepared to pay parking, as they all seem to be claiming, why does it need an Act of Tynwald? I don't think it is it? I think it's a policy thing. An Act states the amount local authority members can claim, but it doesn't mean that they have to. And as far as civil servants are concerned, other people who work in Douglas pay to park, but colleagues who work out of town don't. For example, co-op staff, and they're on the same pay. One rule for government, one for everybody else, says Ros. Afternoon, Stu. This parking pantomime is just getting tedious now. Alan Bell is laughing his head off as we're all not talking about the real ticking time bomb, i.e. pensions. Just do away with free parking for public servants unless needed for their job. Everybody else sorts their own parking arrangement just like the rest of us have to. And do it now, not in 3 or 4 years. If you work where there's no paid parking, lucky you. If not, tough. Yeah, I can see a point in that. Bob called. Alan Bell's going on and on about fairness. Where was the fairness in the £50 toilet tax for pensioners living on their own? There was no fairness in that. Stu, I'd hate to think how much time they'd spend debating an issue of importance. For the record, I think they should have a free parking space. Kate Beecroft made a good point. They voted against her motion last summer that MHK should pay for the car parking. So to say a few months later that they personally don't mind paying is disingenuous. I think you're not the first person to make that comment, to be honest. OK, so 33 can have a vote, 20 vote in favour, job done. What's the problem? Carried. Well, I think that's the idea of it going back to Tynwald next month for a combined vote, isn't it, in terms of a sheer majority? Then it's likely, if people vote the same way, that it'll be carried anyway. It's quite simple. Stop trying to use a smoke screen and mirrors. Just pay up like the rest of us have to. We don't have the luxury of being able to have things put off because of procedural issues. Stop whinging and pay up, says Steve. Stu, maybe the government should let the spaces that are not occupied all the time in Douglas at a discounted rate to the public. I don't know if that would necessarily solve the problem, but I think the problem is that we're being hammered left, right and centre. We now need to see the MHKs having some pain too. No excuses anymore, says Robbie. Good afternoon. Mr Bell has just said that government sometimes gets things wrong every now and then. The man should be in stand-up comedy. His government have been nothing other than a shambles. Everything they've been involved in has had nothing but controversy attached to it. I was going to say roll on the next election, but I'm actually thinking roll on when we take to the streets and demand the removal of 2/3 of these incompetents. I mean, I'm perfectly game for lynch mobs. But, you know, having said that, I think, and I've said this before, I think that the current administration has had the most difficult job to do of any politicians over the last 30 years. Faced with balancing the books after the VAT debacle, then I think that this government's had a massive job to do. And I think they've probably got more right than they've got wrong. And I think it's quite refreshing for a politician to say, listen, you know, we don't always get these things right. I found that very sort of human of Alan Bell to say that. Politicians often don't acknowledge that. About this parking thing, a few thousand per annum might be saved. How about the guys just debate about dog muck and potholes and forget about the 100 millions drained by the government employees' pension scheme, says Albert. Yep, again, Albert, a few people have said that this is just a smokescreen, really, and the real problem is the pensions. For the highly paid MHKs and others too mean to pay, let them park and ride at Pulley for free, says Tom. This parking question is not just about politicians and unfairness to civil servants. Where's the fairness in dozens of cars parked at the C terminal with a disc exempting civil service from the disc restrictions when staff from banks across the road don't? Members of the public an hour, civil service all day, and members of the public at the airport. What about civil service working at the airport? Minister, fairness for all, please, says Les. I think Phil Gawn said last week that he was going to look at the airport. Do they live in the same world as the rest of us? I'm sorry, but they've all shot themselves in the foot and no amount of spin will change people's minds. That's from Skell in Port St Mary. Hey boys, somebody needs to wake old Alfie boy up. Not everybody was born with a silver spoon in their mouths. Pay your share like the rest of us, says Frank. Stu, yes, having listened to the debate on parking charges, that the newspaper has missed the point of an unworkable draft document. One aside that came out is that charges would only be levied at government-owned buildings. Free parking would remain at leased buildings, probably as they can't be sublet due to the contracts. Alf seems to be right. Why not have the allocated spaces with first up best dressed, says Paul. Well, like I say, I think it's all... There's enough time to get, the quirks out of the system like that. If there are any problems like that, surely they can be solved or resolved. Stu, will Douglas Corporation end up paying for its parking spaces, asks Robin. I don't know, but it's a very good point. I mean, a few times I've tried to park in Shaw's Brow and the place is just solid all day, or it seems to be. And I don't know whether or not the Corp uses a lot of those contract spaces or not.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
What do you make of the latest advice from the World Health Organization? Bacon, sausages and ham now rank alongside cigarettes as being linked to cancer. But industry experts say comparing them to smoking is ridiculous. The World Health Organization warns that eating red and processed meats daily can increase the risk of bowel cancer. But the report stresses this does not mean that they're equally dangerous as tobacco. Are you convinced by the findings? Will this classification make you think twice about the amount of processed meat you eat? Or will you pay very little attention to this latest report? Let's go to the lines and see what Tommy makes of this latest news. Hello, Tom.
I mean, I haven't eaten red meat for over 30-odd years now, Stu.
Why?
Well, because I don't want to.
Cause?
I just eat lean chicken breast, Stu, and I've never ever eaten any kind of smoked product in my life.
Why not, though, Tommy? Just because you don't fancy it, or have you got some sort of a...
Well, I thought myself, like, if you were in a sort of like a bonfire and the wood was thing and all the smoke was blowing your way, most people would go round the other side, wouldn't they? Downwind, and he wouldn't go out and say, "No, breathing that lovely smoke, that's doing me the world of good."
So you don't eat kippers or anything smoked?
No, nothing smoked, no smoked meat or anything, Stu.
Okay.
I mean, it was known quite a while ago that the smoked products could be. I mean, there's no definitive answer, Stu. Is there? You won't say you definitely will get cancer, but they've been known to be carcinogenic, haven't they? Smoked products by the very definition of them, being smoked,
And is that why you don't eat them, because you think there might be a health risk, or is it just because you don't fancy them?
Well, I don't particularly like them. I find them the taste. I mean, I don't. I'll go outside and get a stick and chew on it if I want to eat wood stew. Hey.
Marcus sent me a long text on this, an email. It says, as ever, the press are going into overreaction overdrive about the supposedly carcinogenicity of bacon, if I could say it. You made a statement that bacon is in the same category as asbestos for carcinogen. You know what I'm saying. I imagine that you were reading something out from your news sources. Yeah, all of them have got it, and this is from the World Health Organization initially. They're the ones that have said that bacon and processed meats are carcinogenic. So the person writing it has already distorted the information about this issue. Bacon is not in the same category as asbestos. Asbestos is known to cause cancer and is categorised as a Group 1 by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, a branch of the World Health Organization. Well, they're the people who've said this. Asbestos, very dangerous in very small concentrations. One fibre invisible to the human eye can cause a very nasty cancer called mesothelioma. Bacon has been classified by the same organisation as Group 2A. This is for probable carcinogens. So a person may well eat thousands of kilos of bacon throughout their life and a risk still less than that from one fibre of asbestos. With that in mind, the idea of bacon's carcinogenicity has been hugely inflated. We carnivorous humans have been eating processed meat in some form or another for thousands of years. Despite that, the human populations continue to grow to 7 billion, so how big an issue is it really? Well, yeah. I personally think, based on the amount of bacon ingested over a lifetime and the amount of asbestos, cadmium, chromium, nickel, benzene, to name but a few, group 1 carcinogens that do cause cancer from very small amounts, that the WHO has made an error with this headline-grabbing statement about bacon and other processed meats. The world will continue to eat its bacon butties, me included. Best regards from Mark. P.S. Guess what I'm having for dinner, he says. Well, I'm guessing it's probably not an asbestos butty. Personally, I don't take a lot of notice of all these food and other scares. The other day there was a story in the paper that said that bananas can cure flu, AIDS and hepatitis C. So exactly what are we meant to believe? If you took notice of every scare that came out, you'd never even get out of bed, and I bet that can be bad for you as well. You're absolutely right. I think that just walking down the side of the road, you're probably inhaling more particulates and things like that are carcinogenic than by having a bacon bap. According to all these experts, the human race would be extinct by now if everything they said was true, says Neil.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Was it worth spending a significant sum investigating the idea of a TT World Series? The Douglas MHK has attacked the use of over £250,000 of taxpayers' funds by the Economic Development Department to explore the possibility. DED Minister Lawrence Skelly has admitted the global idea is now on hold, but he's still hopeful a commercial promoter can be found in time for next year's home event. The question was asked by Douglas North MHK John Horton. Was the idea of a World Series worth investigating, do you think? Do you welcome the news that the idea of rolling it out is now on hold? Or are you disappointed that it won't be pursued? This was a pie-in-the-sky idea. What a waste, says Steve. And once again, MHK without brains wasting our money, says Trevor. Consultation with island people costs nothing. They can do it if you ask. Now it's time to think about not voting for MHKs in this present government. You have the power, says Treasure. OK, Trevor, sorry. Let's go to the lines. We've got Jill on. Hello, Jill.
I rarely agree with John Horton, but this time, there's not another place in the world that has got a track or a course like we have.
Right.
And, I mean, sort of, I was in Yorkshire going across the Dales and we were sort of taken over rapidly by bikers on a very nice sunny Sunday. But it's still not the same.
No, sure. But, I mean, is that what the TT is? Is it just about the mountain course?
I think so.
You see, I'm not an expert on motorbike road racing. I can take it or leave it. I love the fact that so many people do enjoy it, and I think it's good for the island, so I would never be one of those people who poo-pooed it. But I've got no particular interest in the TT. Now, if I was made Economic Development Minister instead of Benevolent Dictator for life, and my job was to try and bring more money into the island, then that's maybe one of the things that I would have considered. And the thing that we're not probably reflecting on is that I'm guessing that Lawrence Skelly was canvassed by some fairly powerful people who thought that this World Series thing was a great idea and kind of convinced him enough to then go and get consultants for it. So
yes, that is the biggest problem. Why do we always have to go off island for consultants?
Because if we didn't, and again, I know what you're saying, if we didn't, we wouldn't get a proper viewpoint of things. And as I mentioned, I think it was yesterday when Tommy talked about this, the problem is that we are fairly risk-averse in the Isle of Man. It is a stereotype that we don't like change. Stereotypes are usually there for a reason. And I think it's fair to say that most people in the Isle of Man don't like the idea of change, don't like the idea of new things like this. And therefore, if you ask on the island, all the TT diehards who don't like any changes at all to the format would just say no, it's a waste of time. So maybe you do need to go to external people who can look at the bigger picture and say, well, actually, you could have something here.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, they are out to make money.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not Manx, but I am totally behind the island.
Of course.
And this is all wrong. It really is. And also, they're talking about travelling problems and that. Why have the steam packet decided that they're not going to hire the freighter next year?
Yeah, well, Yeah, I mean, I think somebody mentioned the other day, I think it was our friend Andrew in the States, who comes over every year from the US and marshals here at the TT. I think he said that, the answer isn't to decide how successful the TT is on the number of people it brings to the Isle of Man. What they ought to do is to actually monetize an awful lot of it and do more in terms of promotions and, selling advertising around it, getting a global TV reach for it and things like that. But, Lawrence Skelly made the point that, yes, all right, that it is difficult to get over on the ferries at the times that most people want to, but there are plenty of empty berths on sailings that are less popular. So, maybe...
usually those going from the island to across.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. It has been a complete waste of money.
Okay, well, it's a point of view and it's a perfectly fair one, and I think probably an awful lot of people agree with you. Let's go to the lines. We've got Rob on from Peel. Hello, Rob.
I do think it was a waste of money on that particular venture. I think the museum at Derby could have been better spent and had a Hall of Fame there with the full history of the TT, showing pictures of the past champions on their bikes if possible, and the trophies and the films and the books.
Yes.
All under one. And I talked to a lot of visitors who come to the Isle of Man, and they said that there'd be a lot more at the season if there was a lot more going on about the TT.
Well, since I moved to the island in 97, there's been talk of a TT museum. I mean, even going back to then. So you obviously feel that that's something that's long overdue, a TT museum.
That's what they all say.
Yeah.
Like a Hall of Fame for all that. There's 100 years of history concerned with it, and they say it'll be a marvellous museum that was ever done. There are 4 or 5 little museums around the place.
Yeah.
And they all do with a big museum on the cover.
Right. Okay, Rob, some good thoughts there. TT museums, do you think that that's maybe a better thing for us to do to get people around year-round? Stu, I admire the DED department for thinking, but this department has large manpower and budget. Surely more research should have been undertaken by the department prior to employing expensive consultants. The island's relying on this department for the future. I think they need to be more proactive internally. And that's from Alistair, who's listening in Malta at the moment. Right, okay. I hope it's a bit warmer there than it is here. Hello, Stu. I have to agree with Mr. Horton on this issue. In my view, the TT is entirely about the mountain circuit in the Isle of Man. I fail to see the logic in expanding into offshore areas. This seems like an ill-thought-out and expensive exercise. That from Neil. Appoint a private promoter for the TT and you'll lose all the goodwill that it gets from all the unpaid marshals and other officials. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That from David at the hyperbaric chamber. For the sake of balance, does anybody think that this was a good investment? What a load of cobblers. Skelly's trying to waffle his way out of wasting taxpayers' money. Why not put his hands up and admit he got it wrong? Maybe he should resign. Who knows? All I know is that there are island residents struggling while Andy Capp's commandos are wasting our money. Andy Capp's commandos. Anybody with half a brain could see that this was a non-starter from the very beginning. Okay, well, it is a point of view. Stu, a lot of money. I would have thought that if there's a scope to improve the TT locally, as Mr. Scully is now saying, why wasn't this the first step considered by government instead of jumping in and looking globally? I would have thought setting up this kind of franchise, which is what it would have been, would only have resulted in detracting from the uniqueness of the master event. That from Ray. Money is no object to the Manx Motorsport management team. Mr. Scully made a statement, there's plenty of capacity for hotels and travel. He's wrong. Well, I don't think he's saying for hotels. I think he was saying for tent cities and things like that and travel. Maybe there are ways that we can get people to use the less popular sailings where there is still capacity. But our contributor says he's wrong. Yesterday, we tried to make a booking with Steam Packet for 2016 TT, only to be told that all ferries are fully booked for the whole event. Ah, right. In that case, he is wrong, isn't he? The vast majority of people connected with the TT could have told Mr. Scully that this was a non-starter from day one, as it would detract from our own meeting. Were they consulted, and if not, why not? What amuses me is that there's a furious outcry from members of the public, some members of Tynwald, when representatives from the health department spent 10 grand on a trip to New Zealand in an attempt to improve the island's health facilities. Yet here we are spending 276 grand on what was a crazy pie-in-the-sky idea, but in some circles this seems to be accepted as just one of those things, says Colin. Yep, okay. Hi Stu, this is just Horton electioneering. He always picks up on things like this to take the heat off himself, says somebody else. Mr. Skelly, can you make a booking with Steam Packet for next TT, beginning of practice to the end of races? Any sailing and flexible 2 days each way? I can't, says Colin. I agree that there are enough experts on the island who are capable of acting as consultants for the TT, but how many of them would know how to run an event in Brazil or China? TT and a potential World Series are two very different animals, says Tony. Stu, the TT used to be part of World Series till it was stripped of its world status, says Pete. Yes, I don't know much TT history, but I know that. If this had worked, your switchboard would be full of people praising Mr. Skelly. Well, yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. Would someone like to say, how does anyone get in touch with all of the motorcycle associations throughout the world and put the offer forward? No, you get a consultancy to do it, and we don't have one over here. I've found that people don't understand big business and how it works. They just seem to be a bunch of moot farmers. You have to speculate to accumulate, says Chris22. Finally, somebody that is on my side on that. And like I say, I'm neither pro nor against TT. I'm not pro or against government necessarily. I'm just trying to be objective about it. I think the consultants were a great idea. Can we ask them back and ask how many MHKs we really need? And should they pay for the parking? That's from Heavy Hands Mercer, a new contributor to the programme.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Is prevention really better than cure when it comes to the island's health and social care services? The Health and Social Care Minister has received backing for a strategy which the department says will help to save the health service for future generations. In Tynwald last week, Howard Quayle outlined a 5-year, 5-point strategy for a lower cost, more efficient but still high-quality service. It's based around the system he observed during a visit to New Zealand earlier this year, the Canterbury model. The strategy will see large tracts of care shifted from the hospital and other high-cost areas, such as mental health and residential units, out into the community. There's also a focus on disease prevention and healthy lifestyles, telemedicine techniques, and more partnerships with voluntary groups. So is enabling people to live at home for longer a positive step, or is that simply impossible for some people? Are community care and home services a better alternative to hospitalisation or institutional care? Or will the costs of health and social care continue to spiral regardless of whichever model is adopted? Can the costs of delivering health services really ever be cut without limiting the services themselves? And we've got Neil on the line who usually makes some sense. Hello, Neil.
Well, I don't know about sense all the time, Stuart.
I was going to say I've set you up there for a fall, haven't I, really?
I probably have. Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea, actually. Speaking from personal experience, I have 3 or 4 elderly relations, mid to late 80s, living at home. I can't praise highly enough the Southern District community nurses, the mental health nursing team. Wonderful to have all this community service within the house, actually.
Yes.
And it enables older people to remain at home within their own environment, which I think is a great thing later in life for people. The only point I would like to make is that I think that people who break hospital appointments should actually pay for them. I think if the hospital goes to the bother of putting a specialist out or a consultant and somebody is down for an appointment and then they don't turn up, I think they should be billed for that, to be honest.
Well, I think you're probably right, but I think it should work both ways because I've had a number of hospital appointments recently that have been bounced by the medics, and you know they usually give you another appointment that isn't a convenient time, so you've got to get on and cancel that and make another one. So you know, if the hospital makes an appointment with you, they ought to stick to it as well.
Well, yes, I would agree there. I mean, I haven't actually experienced that. I've always found them very good. But if that is the case, then yes, I mean, the rules have to apply to both parties. I agree.
Yeah, I think so. Because, I mean, there is, and this is probably just a perception thing again, but the perception is that, you know, we the customers are actually an inconvenience for many people in the hospital service, in the health service. And there is this presumption that, you know, we can just drop anything and be there at any time they want. And, of course, a lot of people have got jobs to do and can't necessarily do that. And I sometimes wonder whether or not the medical profession realises that.
Well, yes, but I mean, I've always found A&E. I've been hospitalised a couple of times with cycling incidents, to be honest, and I've always found them very, very good down there.
Good.
And I mean, the last time I was in, there were 3 or 4 people who were severely under the weather. They're kicking off, and I thought, well, I really wouldn't like to be here trying to handle these clowns.
No,
to be
not
honest.
an easy job. I appreciate.
But living at home, I think, for the long-term future, I think that's an excellent recommendation by Howard Quayle. And I certainly hope he does get the support of ministers and government members on this one.
Well, the interesting thing for me was listening to what he was just saying about it, on the basis that it's not many months ago that we were discussing on this programme about his trip to New Zealand. And, so many people were getting on saying, oh, it's just a jolly this, this is our politicians going off and spending our money on holidays and things. And he said, well, we've looked at this system and we've seen where it actually works in places like New Zealand. And we had a look at Spain as well. So I think it kind of, it finishes the circle of that in that, yes, he has been abroad on a couple of trips to look at this, and he's coming back now based on that experience, which I think is a good thing.
Yes, I would agree with you there. I think we tend to live in a very small box here, and you do have to go out and do reconnaissance worldwide and see what is going out there and look at other options. And I think this seems a very good option, particularly the facility of encouraging people to remain at home and have care within their own local environment. I think it's a win-win situation, to be honest.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your call, Neil.
Lovely.
Cheers. Lovely. Cutting cost in the health service. My wife, who's paid national insurance for over 35 years, now needs a hip replacement. Told that she's too young at 55. Also needs to see a dermatologist. Told 2-year possible wait. Yet for both, she was told if she went private, she'd be seen right away. Yeah, I'm uneasy about that. So why should she pay twice when people who haven't paid a penny and get everything, says Darren. I think we knew all that without giving you a free trip to New Zealand. I never had a free trip to New Zealand. Hi, Stu. What Mr. Quayle is proposing will increase mental health issues as families are left to their own devices with very little or no help. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt, says Pete. Hi, Stu. I missed a hospital appointment once because I wasn't notified, says David H. Well, that's pretty irritating, isn't it? Difference is, Stu, that the hospital notifies you to change the appointment. Nobody minds if you let the hospital know. It's just when people fail to attend, that's when they should be fined, says Sarah. Yes, I agree with that, Sarah. I take that point, yeah. It's easy to forget an appointment when you get it a year in advance. I've just received an appointment at a clinic for the 31st of October 2016, says Pat. Well, certainly in my experience, Pat, that'll probably be changed 2 or 3 times over the next 12 months, so they'll not let you forget about it, I don't think. Let's go to the lines and talk to Eddie. Hello, Eddie.
I'd like to know how many new staff he's going to require.
I think it's probably more a case. It's more a case, Eddie, I think, of repurposing staff and changing the emphasis on what they do, I think.
Well, actually, I can tell you now that they're very short of staff at the present time.
Yeah.
I've got a relation of 85 years of age with one leg, and it's taken us nearly 3 years before somebody, and only because he was going into A&E so regular, before somebody came to see him.
Right.
So, I mean, it's nice what he's talking about, but when you work it out, Stu, it stipulates, the government stipulation states, if you need a carer in your home, you must have a spare bedroom for them. They must have a bedroom of their own.
Okay.
And yet all the old age pension apartments and flats that they're building are 1 bedroom.
Ah, right. Okay.
So, I mean, they're defeating their own purpose right away.
Yeah, that does seem a bit
Because if you need a carer and you haven't got a bedroom, then you've got to go into a home.
Yeah, I wonder if that's been thought through properly, Eddie. You make a very good point, yeah.
Well, I've been knocking on about this. I'm getting along in the tooth myself now. And I've been knocking on about this for the last 15 years. I've talked to MHKs and all the rest of it, and they all go, oh, good point. Nothing happens.
Right.
They still build 1-bedroom bungalows and 1-bedroom apartments.
Okay.
But as I say, the main thing I'd like to know is if he's going to do this and to keep us older people in our homes, where's he going to get the staff to do it? Because I can tell you now, these girls are working very, very hard just to maintain what they've got now.
Sure. All right, Eddie, thank you for your call. Some good points there. So you've got to have a spare bedroom if you want a carer, but most people are being put into single-bedroom accommodation. Yeah. Val calls. Somebody said that they don't build 2-bedroom elderly persons' dwellings, but the new ones being built as the next phase of Westlands will have 2. So I guess if somebody does fall ill and needs care, then the bedroom is there. Thank you very much, Val.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
is party politics something that could work in the Isle of Man? The topic of party politics on the island was discussed as ILS World and the Junior Chamber of Commerce held a special debate at the Sefton last night. Lib Van members Kate Beecroft MHK and Laurie Hooper were arguing for a party political system on the Isle of Man, with MHK's Chris Robert Shaw and Howard Quayle arguing against. Around 50 people attended the event at the Sefton Hotel, voting overwhelmingly in favour of Messrs Robert Shaw and Quayle. Is party politics a viable option for the Manx political system, or is the political landscape here too limited? Is the system of independent candidates, which the islands traditionally had, more workable, or does that risk leaving an administration with little political cohesion or opposition? Party politics won't work here, and before they even consider it, they should be more concerned in creating a good, honest, open, transparent government. They must also learn not to waste money on stupid ideas and spend what we have looking after those who contributed most into government revenues. They must also take action against some of the companies here that abuse our tax and national insurance systems, who don't or pay very little to be here, says Pat. This from Alan, which makes sense. Party politics only works in countries with big populations where it's impossible to know politicians personally. Yeah, I think you might have a very good point there. Here, it's so small that you vote for the personal manifesto of the person, not the party. I think you stand on for or fall on that, not hiding behind the party line, says Alan. Some good points there, yeah. I mean, I've said before to people, where else in the world could you go where you can open the phone book and find out the name, address and telephone number of all the MHKs, for example, or it would be the equivalent of MPs in the UK. Stu, parliamentary democracy is the answer. Let's use new technology to allow the voting public to make the difficult decisions, says Simon. But the voting public wouldn't make difficult decisions, though, Simon. That's my worry about this. And as with most things, I might be completely and utterly wrong, but Rob called, I don't believe in party politics, but it was interesting to hear Mr. Quayle saying that as an independence, they can represent the whole of the Isle of Man better. I'd like him to justify that, because at the moment most of the key decisions are made by the Council of Ministers, then go through on the nod or are forced through. After the next election, I'd like to see Tynwald become a proper debating chamber again and people being held to account. At the moment, civil servants seem to make the policies and there's no accountability if it's wrong. I'd like to see accountability more than anything else, but I just don't think the island needs party politics at the moment. Again, some very good points there, Rob. Thank you very much. Present system is not democratic, as 5 ministers can enforce their policy, so rather than go for cumbersome party politics, we should try a completely free voting system in Tynwald. If little gets done, then maybe it'll not be a bad thing and can be corrected at the next election if MHKs are not acting responsibly. This from Anna, she says, I think party politics would be better than the clique politics that we have now. Yeah, well, all right, yeah, but I don't know whether or not it is a clique as such. I mean, I suppose you've got the Council of Ministers, which could be considered such, but these are all independent people that effectively come together to become a political party, a ruling political party, don't they? But they're all independents, and I don't know you could call it a clique necessarily, certainly not before the fact, because I don't even know whether or not many of the members of the Council of Ministers know each other or knew each other outside of politics before they became members. So, and now follows a party political broadcast for the Manx Labour Party. This is from David Cretney. I knew that this what I said earlier on would wake him up. The Manx Labour Party has 2 members in Tynwald, myself and Mike Coleman, both MLCs, I think. We have had members in Tynwald consistently since 1918. We long ago recognised the need to work with like-minded independent members to achieve results. We're not opposition for the sake of it, but a progressive force. I suggested the concept of a government of national unity at a time when we all need to work together, but sadly that failed in a relatively short time. I'm currently working on our new policy document. Would welcome anyone to join us. Our next meeting is at South Douglas Old Friends Club at 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 12th of November. We believe our inclusive, positive version of party politics would be good for the Isle of Man, because decisions would be based on policies put forward to the electorate at election time. Thank you very much indeed, Davy Cretney. Or if it was across, it would be Lord Cretney of Braddon, I expect. Thank you. Robin Peel called, I don't believe in a party system for the island, it's too small, but we do seem to have loose alliances between some MHKs, particularly between existing members and some of the newest MHKs. I think that's a better way of working, MHKs forming these alliances to challenge the Council of Ministers, remind them to look after the interests of the people at the bottom of society. I don't think the party system would work. Yeah, I think that's inevitable, isn't it, that you'll find like-minded people who tend to agree on things like that. There are one or two in Tynwald use the keys for their own gain. You won't see a chief constable voting to legalise drugs, but we have a chief minister who brings gay rights to the keys, uses his ministers to back him. Is that the way you see it? Also, why would a chief minister give high-paid department jobs to new members with no government experience? Maybe they've got experience that is useful to government. Stu, if we had party politics, would we know what we were going to get after the election? At the moment, we certainly don't, says Andy. No, but then I don't know if we've got a better idea in the UK, say, where they do have party politics. You know, there's a lot of difference between what people say before and after an election, I think.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who contributed to the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or share your thoughts anytime on the Facebook page. That's Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of the Manx Radio website. And the website's also where you'll find an update of what's being discussed each day on the programme. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com, and you can do that anytime. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.